Throughout the years of The Carol Burnett Show, audiences have grown accustomed to the chemistry between Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman. However, in the middle of the show's live taping, a surprising decision was made. Carol Burnett asked Harvey Korman to leave the show. What happened to lead to this bold decision? Was there a deeper reason behind Burnett's action? Let's find out. But first, let's take a look at Carol Burnett's childhood to get some insight into what shaped her. Carol Burnett, born April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas, had a difficult childhood, but it was those challenges that helped her develop her inner strength and her distinctive sense of humor. Carol's parents, Joseph and Ina Louise Burnett, both suffered from alcoholism, creating a difficult and unstable home environment. Her father worked as a movie theater manager, and her mother wanted to be a writer. But their alcoholism made it difficult for them to provide consistent care for their children. When Carol was young, her parents separated, and her mother decided to move to Hollywood, where she hoped to find opportunities in the entertainment industry. Carol and her half-sister, Chrissy, were forced to stay in Texas and live with their grandmother, Mabel White, whom Carol affectionately called Nanny. Mabel became Carol's primary caregiver and the steady source of support and love she needed during this difficult time. Despite the family's financial constraints, Mabel always tried to provide Carol with a stable environment and encouraged her to pursue her passion for performing from an early age. After a while, the family moved to Hollywood, living in a small apartment in a not-so-glamorous area. This was home to many actors, writers, and people trying to pursue their dreams in the film industry. Their lives were not easy, sometimes having to rely on welfare payments, even pawning things to make ends meet. Despite this, Carol always achieved excellent academic results, especially in subjects related to writing and acting, areas she began to love very early. During those difficult years, Mabel taught Carol valuable lessons about hard work, perseverance, and never giving up. Mabel always encouraged Carol to pursue her acting dream, even though her family did not have the means. Carol attended Hollywood High School when she was a teenager, and it was there that she started to explore her love of the arts. This was the place where she first became aware of her passion for making other people laugh. Here, even though she was known to be reserved, she discovered that she was able to come to life on stage, and people who were around her instantly recognized her skill. One of the most formative years of Carol Burnett's life was her difficult childhood, which was characterized by the absence of her parents and the hardships they faced. The experience instilled in her the qualities of resiliency, independence, and the significance of comedy as a means of coping. Despite the adversities, Carol Burnett emerged from her childhood with a purpose to succeed. Even though it was not Carol's original intention, she began her path into comedy and acting when she was still in her teenage years. Carol came to the knowledge that she had a passion for acting when she was in high school. However, this was more of a gradual awareness than a stunning epiphany. As a child, she entertained the idea of pursuing a career in writing, an ambition that was influenced by her mother, who had also had the desire to become a writer. On the other hand, Carol discovered that she was becoming more and more drawn to the stage, particularly as she started taking part in school performance plays. The words of support that Carol received from a teacher at Hollywood High School were one of the defining events in her formative years from a personal standpoint, because Carol has a natural gift for performance. This instructor recommended that she take acting more seriously. Even though Carol was naturally reserved, the excitement of performing in front of an audience and making them laugh gave her a sense of purpose and boosted her self-assurance. It was because of this support that she was able to recognize the worth of pursuing a career in the entertainment industry, even if at the time it appeared to be an unattainable ambition. After completing her high school education in 1951, Carol went on to pursue a degree in journalism at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, where she first enrolled before changing her major. On the other hand, she immediately shifted her focus to theater arts after enrolling in an acting class that rekindled her enthusiasm for performance. This event marked a key turning point for her, since it was the catalyst that led her to pursue a career in the entertainment industry. Carol participated in some shows when she was attending UCLA, which allowed her to improve her abilities. However, she was still uncertain about how to break into the profession. Even though Carol's passion for acting was developing, she was confronted with a significant challenge: money. At a time when she and her grandmother were struggling to make ends meet, the prospect of pursuing a career in acting appeared to be an extremely remote possibility. Nevertheless, Carol's doggedness propelled her along in the process. At the time when she was attending UCLA, she received an invitation to play at a party that was attended by a notable benefactor. Her performance was so favorably received that the donor volunteered to cover her tuition for the remainder of her stay at UCLA, on the condition that Carol committed to repay the favor by assisting another person who was in need if she ever achieved success. With the help of this generous gift, Carol was able to concentrate on her studies and performance without having to worry about her financial situation. Carol realized that in order to follow her ambition, she needed to relocate to New York City, which is considered to be the center of the entertainment industry. When she graduated from UCLA in 1954, she took the courageous choice to travel to New York despite the fact that she had very little money and no truly significant ties in the business. Some of Carol's first days in New York were challenging. She encountered the standard challenges that an aspiring actor would have, such as encountering financial issues and the difficulty of gaining recognition in an atmosphere that was quite competitive. In order to make ends meet, Carol got a job as a hat check lady when she was living in a boarding home for women in New York. She also worked odd jobs to supplement her income. She tried out for several different parts, but the prospects were limited, and she was frequently turned down for their positions. Carol, on the other hand, did not allow these early difficulties to discourage her. She persisted in performing wherever she could, including in nightclubs and smaller theatrical performances wherever she could. In 1955, she was given a role in a revue that was named the Rehearsal Club Revue. This was the beginning of her big break. She gained some much-needed exposure as a result of this change, but it was still a step in the right direction. It was in 1955 when Carol was allowed to demonstrate her humorous abilities on television when she was cast in a role on The Paul Winchell Show. This was the beginning of Carol's career as a comedian. It was shortly after this appearance that she was cast in the popular Broadway musical Once Upon a Mattress in the year 1959. Producers were interested in her because of her appearance. During the course of her performance in this production, she received both critical praise and a nomination for a Tony Award, which marked the beginning of her journey to fame. Shows hosted by Carol Burnett. By the time it made its debut on CBS in 1967, the Carol Burnett Show had already established itself as a cherished television classic. Although Carol Burnett had already established a reputation for herself in the world of comedy, this variety program allowed her to shine differently. The show was an instant hit, and it lasted for 11 seasons until 1978, during which time Carol cemented her position as one of the most legendary comedians in the history of television. The Carol Burnett Show had a format that was one of a kind, which was one of the reasons why it was so remarkable, because it was a variety program. It featured a range of different things, such as musical numbers, skits, and visits by special guests. At the beginning of each show, Carol would take questions from the audience. This was a section that gave her the opportunity to engage with viewers in a manner that was both captivating and personal. The performance was made to feel friendly and inviting as a result of this interaction, which established the tone for the event. The sketch comedy was the most entertaining part of the evening. Through the efforts of Carol and her ensemble, a series of distinctive personalities and amusing scenarios were developed, which the audience adored. A wide variety of skits were performed, ranging from parodies of well-known films and television series to unique oddball characters who quickly became fan favorites. Carol portrayed the role of Eunice, a long-suffering housewife who was coping with her quirky family, in one of the most famous skits, which was titled The Family. The Went with the Wind parody was yet another iconic skit. In this parody, Carol famously wore a curtain rod outfit in order to poke fun at the film Gone with the Wind. In addition to it, there were a lot of musical numbers throughout the program. Carol, together with the other members of the ensemble, would sing songs, frequently accompanied by stunning choreography and lavish costumes. The play was made more interesting by the inclusion of these musical portions, which also demonstrated the flexibility of the actors. The musical acts were usually well received by the crowd, regardless of whether they were songs with a humorous tone or performances with a more serious tone. An additional highlight of her event was the appearance of special guests. A broad variety of famous people, including actors, comedians, singers, and dancers, were asked by Carol to take part in the festivities on the occasion. The addition of these visitors, who frequently took part in skits or performed with Carol, brought an additional dimension of excitement to the performance every time. For the guests, who were often well-known celebrities at the time, appearing on the show was a wonderful experience since it allowed them to demonstrate their comic skills in a setting that was laid back and enjoyable. The part played by Harvey Korman was a significant individual who had a significant role in the success of the Carol Burnett Show when it was first broadcast. Having joined the program as an initial cast member, Korman immediately rose to prominence as one of the most significant aspects of the show. He frequently played the part of the straight man to Carol's more outlandish characters, which resulted in the creation of the ideal comedy balance. His position in the program was quite important. As a result of his comic timing and his capacity to play a broad range of roles, Harvey Korman became a vital component of the program. He had a talent for portraying characters that were both arrogant and absurd, and his performances were always exactly what was expected of him. His performance as an anxious patient in the dentist sketch, in which he acted against Tim Conway's inept dentist, is considered to be one of his most important parts. Korman notoriously struggled to keep a straight face during Conway's antics, which only served to make the situation funnier. This contributed to the classic status of the skit, which became recognized for its iconic status. There was no denying the strong connection that existed between Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman. How they interacted with one another was so natural that the sequences in which they appeared together were some of the most remembered parts of the program. They were always entertaining in their interactions, regardless of whether they were portraying a couple that argued with each other, co-workers, or anything else in between. Their collaboration was one of the most memorable aspects of the event since Korman was able to equal Carol's level of enthusiasm while also adding his unique touch. Harvey Korman, along with the other members of the group, notably Vicki Lawrence and Tim Conway, have great comic chemistry with each other. There was a sense of camaraderie that was conveyed to the audience as a result of the flawless collaboration that took place among the whole group. During their time together on screen, Korman and Conway in particular formed a unique bond. It was at this time that Conway's ad-libs and Korman's attempts to suppress his laughing became famous. The spectators enjoyed the program because it had an aspect that was spontaneous and surprising, which was complemented by their ability to make each other and the audience laugh. Behind the scenes, there are tensions. Things behind the scenes of the Carol Burnett program were not always as easy as they appeared on film, even though the show was a major popularity. The relationship between Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman, two of the most significant personalities on the program, began to exhibit signs of deterioration over time. These difficulties were caused by the fact that they shared distinct humorous styles and creative approaches, which occasionally clashed with one another and resulted in friction. Both Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman possessed an extraordinary amount of skill. Nonetheless, their approaches to humor were very different from one another. Carol was well known for her ability to think on her feet, her improvisational talents, and her insistence on maintaining a light and enjoyable atmosphere in all situations. She was constantly eager to try new things, and she frequently encouraged her cast to be spontaneous and take chances so that they could give their best performances. Because of this strategy, the ensemble would occasionally surprise one another on set, which resulted in real laughter and a feeling of unpredictability. This method was important in the creation of some of the most memorable moments of the program. In contrast, Harvey Korman had a more conventional and methodical approach to humor. He was known for his meticulousness. He was a perfectionist who appreciated taking the time to fully prepare and rehearse before performing. Korman took his art extremely seriously and frequently made it a point to check out every detail to make sure it was perfect. He was a wonderful performer as a result of his passion, but it also meant that he often found the show's culture of spontaneity and anything goes to be tough. Carol and Harvey's relationship was naturally strained due to the fact that they approached humor in their own unique ways. As the concert progressed, these discrepancies started to produce tension that was increasingly obvious to the audience. It was occasionally the moodiness and temperament of Korman that had an effect on the environment on site. Because of his reputation for being sensitive, he was prone to being easily agitated when things did not go according to plan. As a result, there were times when his disposition would have an impact not just on his own performance, but also on the dynamic that existed among the ensemble. Probably adding to these tensions was the high-pressure environment that was present during the production of a weekly program. The distribution of power over the show's artistic direction was one of the most significant problems that surfaced while it was being produced. In her role as the show's star and the primary driver behind its production, Carol had a crystal-clear idea of what she desired. Given his strong ideas and his propensity toward perfection, Korman occasionally found himself in disagreement with her decisions. Even though both parties were dedicated to producing the finest show possible, these creative conflicts may potentially lead to fights between them, as they would both be trying to steer the program in opposite ways. Their divergent perspectives on how to accomplish that objective frequently put them in conflict with one another. Over time, the friction that existed between Burnett and Korman grew increasingly obvious. There were times when Korman's disposition would have an effect on his work, which made it challenging for the actors and crew to keep the show's environment lighthearted and enjoyable, which was so essential to the show's success. It became increasingly difficult for Carol to handle this situation since she placed a high emphasis on having a happy and collaborative working atmosphere. Despite the problems that occurred behind the scenes, Carol and Harvey maintained their professionalism on film, and their humorous chemistry continued to show through. Nevertheless, the mounting strain finally took its toll on the situation. In 1977, after contributing to the program for a decade, Korman decided to quit. Because he had been such an important contributor to the show's success, his departure was a momentous occasion for the program. Even though the official explanation that was provided was that Korman desired to seek other possibilities, it is quite probable that the tension that existed between him and Carol was a factor in his choice. Although Carol continued the program for one more season after Korman left, his absence was still noticeable. Although the surviving cast members were still skilled and humorous, the relationship had changed. Their teamwork had been a cornerstone of the show's appeal, and it had been a primary reason for its success. Despite the fact that Carol and Harvey would eventually reconcile and even work together again, the tensions that existed during those latter years of the program served as a reminder of the difficulties that may occur even in the most successful creative relationships. The show concluded in 1978. The firing of Korman. For a considerable amount of time, the tension that existed between Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman had been steadily increasing. Nevertheless, it was a particular occurrence that ultimately resulted in the breaking point. As the animosity between Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman continued to rise, an incident that took place during a sketch and featured singer Petula Clark and comedian Tim Conway was a contributing factor. Tim Conway was well known for his ability to improvise and surprise his fellow performers with unexpected words and actions, and the skit in question was a perfect example of a hilarious scene. A significant portion of what made Conway so well liked was this. Because of his unpredictability, the audience and the performers frequently found themselves laughing in a way that was not intended. Conway's improvisation and lighthearted antics, on the other hand, did not sit well with Korman on this particular day. In contrast to Harvey, who favored a more controlled and scripted approach, Conway's conduct was extremely aggravating to Harvey. In the course of the events that transpired, Harvey Korman started to lose his patience. His annoyance became increasingly obvious, and he tried to keep his cool throughout the situation. It was clear to the rest of the cast and crew that they were aware of this tension. Korman's irritation reached a point where it became disruptive as the skit progressed, and it proceeded to that point. His moodiness had an impact not just on his performance but also on the environment on set, making it difficult for everyone to concentrate and take pleasure in the work they were doing. Petula Clark, who was a guest star, was also aware of the tension, and it affected how the scene overall was performed. Because Carol Burnett had always placed a high priority on fostering a good and encouraging atmosphere in her program. She was quite worried about Korman's behavior, at the same time that she was aware of the difficulties that came along with live performances and the demands that came with them. She was also aware of how important it was to keep the atmosphere professional and courteous. When it came to cultivating a feeling of camaraderie among her cast and crew, Burnett had always been a leader who led by example. The actions that Korman had taken on that particular day were unacceptable to her, and she was aware that she needed to confront him about it. Following the finish of the skit, Carol made the decision that it was time to confront Korman about his behavior. She planned a private meeting with him so that she could discuss the events that had transpired openly and honestly. Carol did not try to hide her opinions throughout this encounter. Korman was informed by her that his behavior during the skit was inappropriate, and that it had caused a disruption in the flow of the show as well as the mood. Not only was Burnett concerned about the influence that it would have on that specific scene, but he was also concerned about the wider ramifications that it would have for the working atmosphere of the program. During the course of this conflict, Carol's leadership skills were put to the test. It was necessary for her to strike a balance between her admiration for Korman's abilities and the contributions he made to the program and her need to make sure that the set continued to be a pleasant environment for everyone. It was made quite obvious to Korman by Carol that she appreciated his efforts, but that she could not tolerate his irritability and lack of cooperation anymore. She was determined to guarantee that the event would continue to exhibit the same level of professionalism and teamwork that had achieved such remarkable success. Carol's expectations were not met by Korman's response, although she made an effort to present a constructive solution to the problem. Korman took a defensive stance that prevented him from recognizing his conduct and agreed to work on improving it. The reaction that Carol received was the last straw for her. She realized that the circumstance had progressed to the point where a courageous choice needed to be made. As the boss of the show, Burnett was aware that she had a responsibility to put the health and happiness of the whole cast and staff at the forefront of her priorities. The choice to terminate Harvey Korman was a hard one for Carol Burnett to make, due to the fact that Korman had been an essential contributor to the success of the program. She did not make this decision randomly. Carol, on the other hand, was aware that allowing the tension to persist would be destructive to the program as well as the creative climate that it provided. By taking this action, Burnett displayed her dedication to sustaining the principles that had contributed to the Carol Burnett Show being such a well-liked and admired program. This occurrence was a defining point in the course of the show's production history. It brought to light the difficulties that come with working in a workplace that is particularly high pressure, as well as the significance of retaining professionalism even when tensions are at their highest. It is a credit to Carol's strength as a leader and her desire to ensure that her show continues to be a good and collaborative place for everyone involved that she chose to terminate Korman. Although it was a challenging situation, it also served to highlight the significance of establishing limits and ensuring that even the most gifted individuals are capable of taking responsibility for their actions. As a result of this, a wave of shock was felt among the cast and staff of the Carol Burnett Show when Harvey Korman was terminated from his position within the show. Korman had been a pivotal player in the program, and he was well known for his outstanding comic timing and powerful presence in a number of the most famous sketches. A big void was created as a result of his leaving, and there was an instant anxiety over the manner in which the performance would go without one of its most important actors. The remaining members of the cast faced a challenge that went in two directions. To begin, they had to get used to the fact that Korman was no longer present, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. His chemistry with Carol Burnett and other cast members, such as Tim Conway and Vicki Lawrence, had been a significant contributor to the popularity of the program. Without him, there were doubts about whether or not the program would be able to continue to provide the same level of quality and humor that viewers had grown to anticipate. The second challenge that the ensemble faced was dealing with the emotional fallout of the death of a friend and colleague. While there had been tension leading up to Korman's departure, he was still someone they had worked closely with for many years. His absence was felt deeply, and it took time for everyone to adjust to the new dynamics on set. Despite these challenges, the show continued. The remaining cast members, led by Carol Burnett, were determined to keep the spirit of the show alive. They adapted by taking on new roles and expanding their range to fill the void left by Korman. Tim Conway, who had often played the role of Korman's comedic foil, stepped up and took on a more prominent role. His ability to improvise and bring fresh humor to the show helped ease the transition. The show's writers also had to make adjustments, finding new ways to develop skits and create content that would resonate with the audience without Korman's involvement. While the transition was not without its difficulties, the show managed to find its footing. The adaptability of the cast and crew was crucial in ensuring that the quality of the show remained high, even in the face of such a significant change. Korman's eventual return. Although the initial separation was tough, it wasn't the end of the relationship between Harvey Korman and the Carol Burnett Show. After some time had passed, both Korman and Burnett began to reflect on what had happened. Korman, in particular, started to understand the reasons behind his firing. He realized that his behavior had been unprofessional, and that it had created a negative atmosphere on set. This period of reflection led him to reach out to Burnett to make amends. Carol Burnett, who treasured the time spent working together and being friends, was amenable to making amends. She was sympathetic to the stresses of a high-pressure creative setting and valued Korman's admission of fault. After talking things out, they were able to put their differences aside and bring Korman back on the show. An important turning point for the show came with Korman's return. It was a metaphor for a personal as well as a professional reunion. His demeanor changed significantly upon Korman's return. Everyone on set appreciated how he became more laid back and helpful. A revitalized feeling of solidarity supplanted the tension that had prevailed. Audiences were thrilled to see Korman return, which gave the play a lift. In the long run, Korman's career was affected by the reconciliation. He frequently mentioned how the experience emphasized the significance of professionalism and collaboration in the entertainment sector. He developed personally and professionally as a result of that humiliating experience. It became clear in the wake of the tragedy how difficult it is to keep a popular TV program going for a long time. It also highlighted the value of talking things out, taking stock, and being able to pick yourself up after a setback. Their professional relationship was able to recover under Carol Burnett's guidance, and Harvey Korman's readiness to learn from his errors enabled them to keep making the beloved humor that fans adored. Professionalism is Burnett's priority. Carol Burnett demonstrated her steadfast dedication to professionalism and respect in the event with Harvey Korman, which was a watershed point in her career. On The Carol Burnett Show, Burnett showcased her leadership skills in addition to her humorous talents. She fostered an atmosphere that encouraged innovation, while yet making it plain that professionalism and respect were not up for discussion. The show's long-term popularity was helped in part by Burnett's tough choice to terminate Korman. She maintained an upbeat and productive environment on set by putting the happiness of her crew and the success of the program ahead of her personal relationships. Because of this choice, the program was able to keep improving and evolving even when a major cast member left. Many comedians and performers have credited The Carol Burnett Show as an influence on their work. Comedy fans and professionals alike still talk about how the show revolutionized variety shows with its groundbreaking combination of skits, musical number, and guest appearances. Carol Burnett's tough decisions, such as firing Harvey Korman, were crucial in keeping the program a treasured part of television history. A watershed moment for Carol Burnett's show occurred when she decided to terminate Harvey Korman. Many were taken aback by the decision, which put their friendship to the test. What do you think about Carol Burnett's decision? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting updates. Thank you and see you in the next videos.